Welcome to 24 Astro. My name is Alva. Today I want to talk about how astrology can be quite confusing sometimes and how to make it simple. And I'm gonna start doing more of these like sit down videos because in like the core thing of this channel is just that I love astrology and I just want to talk about it. So it doesn't have to be a big thing, a big like that I build it up in my head. I just want to sit down and talk, so that's what I'm gonna do. And I'm just gonna be as real as I can be. So today I want to talk about how it can be quite confusing and what I wish I knew kind of when I started, because I discovered astrology during my Saturn return and I knew about astrology beforehand. I heard about it and I knew like mainstream horoscope readings, but I never found them to be interesting or even like appealing. Sometimes I might have read my if you hear some like tapping on the background, it's my dog that's walking around and eating his food, so yeah, okay. So like I might out of curiosity read like my column where it said something, but I always found it to be so generic that I didn't even understand like the meaning or like why people are so into this. And then during my Saturn return I got like the advice that I should look up if it is my Saturn return, because I was about that age and I felt a lot of like challenges being thrown my way. So then I looked it up and it was my Saturn return in like a few weeks before I looked it up. And then at the first, like, it was kind of like love at first sight, but I was so overwhelmed with everything. And I didn't even like get into it in a very like logical way. I just dived right into it, as I often do. As I have Mercury retrograde, it makes sense that I always like devour things from like an outside in perspective, and this was kind of like what I did with this as well. I just watched so many YouTube videos on astrology, and at the beginning it was like I got overwhelmed with the information and I just kept like feeding it in my brain and just like watching, like I probably watched like every video out there on my like sun sign, moon sign, like everything, all of my planets. I've probably watched them, and it took maybe a year for me to land in the meaning. And once I understood what it's about, how it's built up, and like understood the origin of it, it was so much like it suddenly it just clicked and made sense. And I think I would like to talk about like origin and stuff like that because I find it very interesting. But in this video I want to talk about how I view astrology now at this point in my life, and then like how to use that knowledge. So at this current moment I'm viewing astrology from an esoteric view. When you look at your chart, it's like a frame from how the sky looked when you were born, and all of the different positionings of the planets are like a map of your psyche. So like now if I look at like the astrological wheel, I look at it and kind of see like my brain, because that is what makes sense to my ego, and it's not that but it kind of like makes sense for my ego to view it that way. So with that said, it's the soul's contract based on what the soul's intention is. And what is very confusing in the beginning is that you know all of these placements, and you have all of the like symbols, and there's so many layers. But if you think about astrology as kind of like this, it's the microcosm of your being to the macrocosm. So the chart is your microcosm. Wherever your sun is in your chart, that is the midpoint of your own solar system. So everything should be viewed from that lens. And I kind of also view now that the different astrological placements have different percentage of how much they influence you, depending on all of your chart, depending on if you where you are in life, like the astrological transits at the moment. So it differs and it's evolving all the time. But I think to understand your natal chart firstly is most important before you go on to like study and view and keep track of transits. So the sun is your some people say ego, but I view it as it's your ego and soul intertwined. It's like your ultimate life mission, where you have your moon, that is the feminine principle of yin yang, and that is your essential needs, like the unnegotiable needs that you need to feel balanced to make everything else happen. So I mentioned also in a few videos the big three, and that is the sun, the moon, and your rising sign. And then you have the rising sign, which is like kind of like how you view the world and how the world views you. And it's right on like the first house, so it's very visible. Whichever sign there you have, it's very visible on you, and probably like what you will relate to as well. And this is not like your rising sign is not, it's a big part of you, but it's not ultimately who you are here to be. All of these three energies are a very big percentage of your wholeness. And I also know that I mentioned in a video that the highest expression of your rising sign could help you catapult into your sun sign, the positive expression of your sun sign. Because every sign, every zodiac sign, we all have the 12 in us, but just depending on our big three, we can relate to them, the patterns of the zodiac signs, we can relate to them in different degrees, different percentage. So we're all ultimately, all the 12 zodiac signs are representing the big collective, like the soul's journey to oneness. It's what it's representing. And wherever we have them, depending on where your rising sign is, that will set the whole chart. So depending on where your rising sign is, that will set the tone for your journey. So understanding the big three, and that you do by, I would say, firstly, understanding the mythology behind the archetype of that zodiac sign is a good way to start. Really understanding what it is representing, because there is where you get your cautionary tale to understand the zodiac sign. To really understand astrology, we need time. We need to really it's a language, so we need to hammer in the understanding with the keywords, with understanding the mythology, by consuming content about these placements. When we really get them into our being, we can start to, with self-reflection, understand, okay, this is this placement when something happens in your life. Like, say you are trying to really understand how you function when it comes to relationships, and you start to explore your Venus placement, for example, or like something in your 7th house. you're starting to unravel these aspects in your chart correlating to you, how you are and how you show up in relationships. And with that, you can, with self-reflection, understand, okay, this was because of that. And you use the astrological placement to really pinpoint and narrow down different psychological patterns in your being. And with that, you can like kind of like put an anchor onto your self-knowledge and your like emotional states. Because if we're just going about life and then reacting to whatever is happening to us, it's not always that easy to get like self-conscious or to understand why we reacted the way we did. But with the language of astrology, we can have that concepts and those anchors with our astrological knowledge to really like fast track our evolutionary conscious like advancement. So we can use it for self-reflection once we really understand the astrological language. And also I think starting with the mythology and understanding them is a good way to understand the zodiac signs. But then you also want to so get acquainted with the zodiac signs. Understand that Aries is the first one, Pisces is the 12th, and understand that they are showing us the journey of the soul's spark of, like, Aries is the spark of separateness, and it's the ego coming into form, and then it goes around the wheel in the different zodiac signs, and then it comes back to Pisces, which is merging with the oneness, merging with the collective unconscious. And once you understand all the 12 zodiac signs, you can go on to to the whichever order calls mostly for you. It depends, of course. Maybe you have some grasp of like the houses and what they are representing. Maybe then you don't have to focus on that, but you can always learn more. But after understanding like the zodiac wheel and understanding the mythology behind all of them, you could go into the, because we're working with 3 layers all the time, and this is just like super basic astrology, because then we have aspects, and that's a bit more advanced, and that's where things can get very tricky. But we let's start with the zodiac wheel and understanding the 12 placements, and then going on to the planets and what they represent. And if we look at the planets in the chart as representing a psychological pattern that all humans experience, and for example, let's just say Saturn is restriction, Venus is harmonizing with others or balance, very broadly said, and the Sun is the ego. And there's a good expression and a bad. The bad expression is very identification with the ego. The good expression is like soul and ego together. The Moon is your nurturing feminine principle. Sun also is the masculine principle. That's why it's the ego. And then we have Jupiter, which is growth and expansion. And then we have Mercury, which is communication. And then we have Uranus, which is individualization. Like the Carl Jung concept, and Neptune, which is kind of like the correlation of the 12th house, which is oneness. So to get a good grasp of the planets, and also like start to put anchors into them, like put one word into what they mean for you, and then going on to understanding the houses. And the houses is not something you would have to memorize. You can always look up what they mean, but having them all, these 3 layers, and then putting them together. So for example, you have Mercury in your 4th house in Leo, for example. So we have 3 layers on top of each other, And then you could divide them into like saying that Leo is equal to this word for you, and then it's the fourth house is equal to this, and then Mercury equals this, and then putting them together. So kind of like doing that equation in the beginning to really understand, and trying to change the keywords. That is very like, that's the big challenge in the beginning, to understand those layers on each other. But with time and with what I said, like reflection on when something in this area happens, and then you like putting a stamp on it in retrospect and realizing, oh, that was this placement, and then you start to get a bigger understanding of what this actually means. And that can only happen in retrospect. Like it can only happen if you reflect on something. And that's why doing shadow work on the placements, like putting that the 3 layers down and sitting with it and like thinking about your life and thinking about, okay, what does this mean? Like what memories do I have that connect to this, depending on the area, the zodiac sign, and the planet. And then getting a grasp, starting to get a grasp on what they mean. And the fun thing is that this is like a gift that keeps on giving. It's just you can always understand it better. For example, a lot of videos that I've done that were my own placements, I've developed so much more like understanding of the placements. Like for example, Lilith has been a very big thing for me the past few months, and now I feel like I really want to do like a new one that's Black Moon Lilith in the 5th house and in Taurus, which is my placement. And like it keeps on evolving my understanding of them, because I keep living my life just as you are. So we're just like uncovering and unfolding everything more as we go along. So it's so like, it's such a good tool for someone that is on the like journey to self-discovery, and such an like a brilliant system, because the symbolism of the archetypes and the symbolism of that like the planets and the archetypes, and like also like the intuitive aspect that our subconscious can speak to us from just looking at our chart. We can get so much different things said to us depending on where we are at life. So it's kind of like this. It's kind of like tarot cards as well. I love astrology, so I'll keep on doing videos. I just built it up in my head, and I also have a lot of different things going on in my life that I started to go into a journey of becoming a student again, because I could not handle working all the time. So I'm like buying myself time to do what I really want to do, which is YouTube. And I feel some shame coming up in my body as I say this, because I think I have this judgment that it's greedy to want to do YouTube. It's greedy to want attention. And that is my Black Moon in the 5th house. But I'm working on it, so I'm really working on it. So thank you for watching. I hope this was interesting, and leave a comment if you if this awoke something in you, and if you have something to share. I love to read your comments. So I'll see you in the next video.